I welcome Rick West onto the podcast to discuss the three attractions that have had the biggest influence on him and his career in the themed entertainment industry. You are listening to episode 414 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am your host, Lee. I always then start these the same, right? I've got no Darren, no Tracy, no Chris. I am joined by a guest. I will introduce him in a second, but this is another ride that made me. I encourage everyone to go back and listen to the previous ones. I've had the awesome Catherine Cobbs and her lovely boyfriend Andy DiGenova, Jason Sorrell, Justin Martin, Julie Zimmerman, and it all kicked off with Adam Bezark. So for this one, I would like to welcome Rick West. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Lee, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to do this with you.
It's weird, isn't it? Because people think it's like, oh, they've just started talking and we've been talking for like 25 minutes before we started recording this.
Of course. We're going to basically retread everything that we talked about. Yeah. But for real this time.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Rick, people should know who you are at this point. I am ashamed to say that. I didn't realize how much you'd had your hands on, but there we go.
Well, no, it's funny. And when we did start talking a few weeks ago about doing this, you know, I kind of live this weird double life, whereas people know me for a long time as Theme Park Adventure, and then the conventions, Midsummer Scream. And then there's the whole other side where I actually have worked in the themed entertainment industry for almost 10 years now. And I've worked for a lot of different shops here in Southern California. And sometimes people don't make the connection or even necessarily know that the two have coexisted for a long time.
Yes.
And just a couple of years ago, I retired Theme Park Adventure. So now the only thing that it really exists is my career in the industry, as well as Midsummer Scream, which is a career into itself. But but a lot of people, don't feel bad, a lot of people don't realize that, because they figure, well, he's just the dude that shows up at all the Halloween stuff every year, you know, and they don't realize that, you know, for the rest of the year, he's actually designing things and working with folks. And it's very interesting because it's bled into each other over the years. The reason I work in the entertainment industry is because I spent 20 some odd years, you know, or almost 20 years at that point, writing about the people that were in the industry. So I already knew all the people in all the different circles. And it just took one little phone call. Somebody called me, my mentor, actually, Bob Baranek, called me, and he was with Dave Cobb at Thinkwell at the time. And they said, hey, are you looking for work? And at the time I was doing some horrible, horrible writing job. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm looking for a freaking razor blade at this point. Yes, I'm looking for a job. And so that phone call, that just out of the blue moment, literally changed my life and my entire career path in a matter of about 72 hours.
Yeah.
So it's been a pretty crazy journey, and a rare one, that like a total fanboy. And Theme Park Adventure was the first themed entertainment online, you know, blog ever. I mean, we started in 94 in print, before there was even an internet. And so I published 2 books, one on Pirates of the Caribbean and one on Tarzan's Treehouse. And then it just kind of all meshed to online, because online became a thing. And so it's just kind of a weird, it's just been interwoven, and you just never hear of, oh, well, he was a fanboy for 20 years and then suddenly started working in the industry. That just doesn't usually happen. It does, but it just doesn't. And so, but it did get to the point recently where I started working for more high profile projects and clients, where when you sit in a room and say, oh yeah, and he also has this blog, you kind of get the weird side eye, like, oh, you do? You know, type of thing, little awkward turtle moment. So it was very apparent that it was time to, close the chapter on TPA. It was an amazing ride, and it served its purpose. And I look forward to the adventures that are yet to come.
Well, let's talk about that briefly then, Rick. What companies have you worked for, and anything our listeners will not have you? I don't know whether we're allowed to talk about it, but anything you've worked on at Universal that we'll know?
I worked, so one of the companies that I did work for was Rethink Leisure and Entertainment. And while I was there, I worked with Gary Blumenstein, who is a creative director at Universal Creative. In fact, he was a creative director on Hagrid's. And Gary is legendary in the industry, and Gary and I go way back. And Gary and I worked on there was a pre-show for an attraction that's being done for Universal Beijing. I don't know if they've announced like what's going to be at Beijing, so I don't know if I can say what the attraction is. It's kind of a rehash of one that they already have at one of their other parks. And so that was my stint. I wrote a pre-show for it that was very well received. In fact, they shot it, and then from what I understand, sadly, somebody along the line said, no, we're going to go in a different direction. And so, as so often happens in this industry, everything has been set and done and ready. And then someone comes along and says, no, I want to do this. And the whole thing gets kind of canned and shelved. So that was my one little mystery Universal project that I've worked on. I've done a lot of stuff for Chinese parks. Some will never get built so in the industry, I started as a show writer.
Okay.
So when you begin, it's not like you're show set or an engineering or anything like that. If you are a show writer, you are the once upon a time guy. My tool is a Word document that is blank, and it's my job to paint with words the best description of an attraction that I can. That then goes to artists that create concept art. That goes to the engineering team to start figuring out what type of ride system or what type of show set design we need to come up with. So 99% of the stuff that a show writer works on never sees the light of day. In fact, when I hired in Bob Baranek, who was my mentor, he was Tony Baxter's right hand for many, many years at Disneyland and then on Disneyland Paris. He said, look, as quickly as you can, you need to learn not to be attached to anything that you work on, because it will likely never happen. And when it does happen, it's going to be so different than what you turned in as your final draft, because everybody has to put their stink on it. He goes, as soon as you can swallow that pill and understand that that's going to happen, you'll get along just fine in this industry. He goes, you have to learn to kill babies and not even think about it and just keep moving forward. And I took that to heart, and it's true. Because in the 8+ or whatever years it's been now that I've been doing this, I think maybe 2 attractions that I've worked on have really come to fruition, and they're all like in like Dubai or there's one at Ferrari World, and it's just stuff that like none of my friends will be like, oh yeah, I rode that last week. I don't get to have that thrill yet. I have worked on stuff here in the States, but again, concept. And it seems like every time you get out of Blue Sky and everybody's done playing in the sandbox, at that point, most clients go, oh, wait. You mean this really does cost money? And it costs a lot of money?
Yeah.
Everybody wants the biggest and best attraction. And if you're a foreign client, it has to be better than Disney or Universal. Right. That's always a bullet also. Everything has to be, and of course, cheap. Can't spend any money, but it's got to be better than Disney and Universal.
Okay, then.
And so, yeah. And so that's something that every designer listening will laugh at and go, yup. Either they're laughing or they're crying in a cocktail right now over that. So that's just kind of like the ongoing struggle. But I've worked for groups, Think Well. I've worked for the Hedema Group. Oh. I've worked for BRC Imagination Arts. I've worked for Rethink. And now I am the Vice President of Creative Development for Idea Attack. And we are a company in Pasadena. They're over 15 years old. It's Dan Thomas and Natasha Varnica. They brought me on. They are no newcomers to the industry. They're just very quiet. They're a company that by design has not been out there in the spotlight with podcasts or blogs or a lot of social media presence. So they brought me on to really start a brand new chapter in their company. And I'm so honored and so grateful to be with them. And they've done a lot of out of country stuff, a lot of Chinese stuff. They've done Russian stuff. They've done a lot of Asian stuff. And so that's kind of where the market is at the moment for us. And so that's the stuff that I'm working on now, and we have a lot of exciting things to come.
Awesome, very cool. Well, we wish you all the best in the future, but right now we want to talk about what shaped you as a person, Rick.
Oh my God, that's so damaging.
We don't want to know about what happened when you were 5, anyway. But anyway.
Oh man, yeah.
So Rick, I gave you the same task that I've given all my other guests, and that is to come up with a list of only 3 attractions. Now, as I've said already, Adam took the term attractions and twisted it into anything he wanted straight away. So it's carte blanche now to come up with whatever you want. But the 3 attractions that have had the biggest impact on you and your career in the themed entertainment industry. And as I've said, it's not so much about the attraction itself, it's why it's had that impact on you.
Yeah. What a question. At first you're like, oh, well, that's easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And therein lies the challenge, because as a designer, there isn't one attraction experience that I've ever had that hasn't shaped me. And so that's a weird one. And it became, well, God, maybe I can go Adam's route and kind of like change it into like the parks that made me. And then I thought, well, hell, there's more than 3. So I thought, oh, hell. And then I started writing a list. I started writing a list this last week of things that I want to like, but there are runners up, and let's talk about these, Lee. And Jesus, it suddenly became a list of every attraction out there, type of thing. And I thought, oh, hell, we're just gonna do this off the cuff.
Okay.
But there are 3 that I can definitely call out, right. And then there are more. But I mean, there are 3. The first one's going to be really weird unless you are a middle-aged person living in Southern California. I grew up in Southern California, and at the age of about 2, my grandfather started taking me to like every park that existed here in Southern California, just on this constant rotating basis. And one of those parks was Santa's Village up in the San Bernardino Mountains. And Santa's Village opened at the same time that Disneyland did in the 50s. And they had, we're going back for number 1, we're going back to the early 70s. There was a really weird, funky Alice in Wonderland walkthrough attraction. And it was half mirror maze, half just really funky painted murals in these man-made caverns. And there were slides, and there were no big fancy sets. There was no fancy soundtrack. There were just things like the painted table on the wall that, had the bottles that said drink me and the food that says eat me. And for some reason, just going through that, and there was never anybody even then, like there was never a line or a queue for that. So I would just spend hours going through that over and over again by myself as just a little guy, like probably, 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And boy, that just fired my imagination for whatever reason, that just fired my imagination like crazy. And so that is one of the first theme park experiences that I can really remember that to this day has left an impression on me. And so you go back on YouTube and you look at videos of people like sneaking in and walking through a very defunct at the time, Santa's Village. And boy, you catch a glimpse of these things. Like there was one video, I don't even remember who did it, but they caught a glimpse and kind of walked through what they could of the Alice in Wonderland thing. And oh my God, it was so emotional seeing this. And so that's number 1. Okay. And it's something that you can't relate to at all. No. So yay me. But in fact, I would be very surprised if very many of your listeners said, oh my God, I remember that. But that was certainly number 1.
I am going to invite all of our listeners at this point to email us messages if you know what Rick's talking about. And let's see how many people we can get to go, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Man, that's going to be crickets. But you got to let me know though.
Oh,
and God, if people have pictures, oh my God, if people have pictures of themselves in that or whatever, have them send that, because it really, and the whole park was just a wonderful, weird little park. They've kind of revived it now, and it's not really a theme park, but, and it's very different than what it was back then. But boy, wonderful memories, because my family grew up. We had several cabins on the mountain as I grew up, and so Santa's Village was a big part of my life. And it was. You got to look it up when we're done with this.
I will
take some time and look up. You'll see the craziest, like weirdest characters, and just the funkiest, weird little attractions. And it was just pure theme park gold.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Right. Before we move on to the next one, Rick, we'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, of course. I have to pay the bills.
Perfect.
And then we'll be back.
You bet.
Have you taken a stroll down Diagon Alley and visited Gringotts Bank? Taken a ride through New York with Jimmy Fallon? Visited the Truffalo trees in Seuss Landing, or hung out with a real-life Transformer? No? Then what are you waiting for? At Universal Orlando Resort, there truly is an option for everyone. Or if you're leaning a little more towards pixie dust rather than wands and potions, Disney destinations around the globe await your arrival. No matter the adventure, our sponsors have you covered. Be sure to let the experts at Mouse and Muggle Travel Company take care of all your travel needs, earning the distinction of being an earmarked agency specializing in Disney destinations, as well as becoming one of the first to be named a U Preferred agency with Universal Parks and Resorts Vacations. Mouse and Muggle Travel Company will ensure you receive top-rated customer service. Just visit mouseandmuggle.com to fill out a no-obligation quote request, or send your request to info@mouseandmuggle.com. Their team can take care of you no matter where in the world you want to go. With a flick of their wand and a little bit of pixie dust, the process will be so seamless, some might even say it's simply magical.
Welcome back, everyone. I am here with Rick West, theme park creator, designer, whatever you want to call him. We've heard his first one.
People want to call me a lot of things.
I wouldn't be so bold.
Boy, you just opened that Pandora's box, didn't you?
Anyway, moving on. Move us on to your number 2 attraction then, Rick.
So number 2 is going to come as no surprise to anybody that knows me. It's Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland. That was one of the first, if not the first, attractions at Disneyland that my grandfather ever took me on. And that would have been when I was about 2. Pirates opened in 67. I was born in 70. So Pirates was brand spanking new still when I was a little boy. And so though I don't have any moving memories, I do have snapshot memories of riding on my grandfather's shoulders in the queue that was unbearably hot. There used to be a really long extended queue area along the side of the building, kind of where the everything was rerouted and moved for the Indiana Jones queue and all that. But alongside Pirates, there used to be this long extended queue on the inside, and it was like a greenhouse, and it used to get so freaking hot in the side queue. And I remember being really hot and sitting on my grandfather's shoulders that day. On one of my very early visits to Disneyland in that really crowded queue for Pirates. But then I grew up loving Pirates. As soon as I graduated high school in the late 80s, I went to work at Disneyland as a Pirates of the Caribbean cast member.
Awesome.
And so that was obviously a huge part of my experience. And, it was not until I worked at Disneyland that I even, when you're a casual park goer, or even more than casual, being a Southern California, resident and going to all these parks growing up, you never really, at least back then, now things are different, I think, but back then, you never once sat back and went, I wonder who created this. Yeah. I wonder who designed this. It just wasn't a thing. In fact, I had no idea that show writing was even a thing until I was working at Disneyland and I met Tony Baxter. Awesome. And he then in turn introduced me to his best friend and show writer, Bruce Gordon, who wrote a lot of things for Tony, including Splash Mountain. And that was when they were building Splash. That was when Bruce said, oh yeah, I'm a show writer. That's what I do. And I'm like, well, what is this? and we had this conversation, just the three of us standing by ourselves outside of Splash. And that's like the Jesus light came down at that moment. And I was like, I know what I want to do. And then it would be 20 some odd years before that would even come to fruition, maybe more than that. But I worked Pirates, and in working Pirates, I got to know people that had been at Disneyland for a long, long time. Now, being there in the 80s, I was, I came right after they had a really bad strike at the park. And so there was a lot of torn relationships, and it was like new school versus old school cast members. And it was a very interesting time. And I met some really cool folks there, and they just passed down a lot of information. And that totally shaped who I was. I mean, I fell in love with Disney and the idea of working at Disneyland and creating things. I fell in love with that so much that I dropped out of college to work at Disneyland full time, which really thrilled my family, Lee. And it just became a thing. And like any theme park fan will tell you, there was just a moment where somebody kind of like hits a switch. Yeah. Right. And there's no rhyme or reason. It just became at that point something that I had to do. It was this itch that couldn't be scratched. And I became voracious for anything and everything about Disneyland. And then that spread rapidly to other things like Knott's Berry Farm and Magic Mountain and things like that. And so that since I was a teenager, I really kind of knew what I wanted to do. And it just took a long time for it to happen because there were no resources like the TEA or anything like that back then for me. So it just was a long and windy road to get me here finally. But then years later, I wrote a book on Pirates of the Caribbean that I just thumbed through. It came out like in '96. And I just thumbed through it a couple nights ago with my girlfriend, and because she hadn't really seen it before. And boy, it was just a walk down memory lane because a lot of the folks that I interviewed and that really participated in making this book, which is still considered one of the best things that's ever been. It's 170 pages. It's considered one of the best things that's ever been done on pirates. A lot of the folks just aren't around anymore. Yeah. I had an interview with Marty Sklar in there because I became friends with Marty, and I knew him when I was at Disney, and then years later, and in doing this book, I became very close with Mark and Alice Davis.
Wow!
And spent a lot of time hanging out with them at their house. And it's just a weird thing when you go back and look at these, and it's just a snapshot in time, like we all have, right?
Yeah.
Where in your mind it seems like yesterday, but in reality, a lot's passed. And so, so Pirates of the Caribbean is definitely solid on my list.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think there's only Catherine. I said a lot of the times when I've done these interviews, there's two attractions. There's one of two attractions that's on everybody's list, and it's either Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion. And Catherine's the only one that didn't have either of those on. But you look, Disney was the first real theme park that really had an impact making fully immersive attractions like that. And you look at something, I've never ridden Pirates out in Disneyland, but obviously riding it in Florida, which I've heard is way inferior compared to the one over there. And then looking at the one that's, is it Shanghai Disneyland, that looks amazing.
Right. Well, first of all, you guys got to come out here. I always listen to your podcast. I'm like,
I know.
God damn it. Why don't you guys come out here? Come out to Southern California, and that way, folks out here can see you and hang out with you and visit the parks with you. If you enjoy Florida's Pirates, your mind will melt. Our Pirates is so much better. And, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Shanghai, and I went on a day when I swear to God, I was like the only person in the park. I walked onto Pirates 5 times. There was no line.
Awesome.
And so many of my friends go, I hate you. I waited 3 hours in a miserable line for that. But I did Pirates 5 times there, and it's a fantastic attraction. I have to say, Adam did a fantastic job. Adam busted my balls. Like anytime I would talk about Shanghai, he'd be like, and Pirates was fantastic, right? Because he did the scripting for it. And I said, I don't know. It was in Chinese. It could suck. I don't know if it was good. And he goes, it didn't suck. I said, okay, of course. You wrote it. It was brilliant, Adam. It was brilliant. So, but it's a fantastic attraction. But, now that it's been 2 years since I've been on it, and it's very different. It's based on the franchise as opposed to being the attraction, right? So it's apples and oranges.
Yeah,
it is impressive in just about every way, and it has one of the best show set. It has one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a ride in the graveyard of ships. Is beautiful, but still, I don't think it even comes close to the original Pirates.
Yeah,
because if you step back and put yourself in the mid '60s, and this thing is being built, could you imagine back then going into Pirates of the Caribbean and maybe never have even seen an animatronic figure before?
Yes.
And then suddenly you're going through this 20-minute experience that's packed full of over 100 animatronic figures, including humans and animals. And then you're going down waterfalls, and you're in caverns, and you're in a freaking boat going through all this stuff. That would have been so unbelievable, right? We geek out when we go on things now like Rise of the Resistance. But you got to think, back in the day, going on something like Pirates and then and then going on Haunted Mansion, a couple years after that, talk about a mind-melting experience for Disneyland guests back then.
Yeah.
God, I would give anything to be able to go back and feel that. That would be just unbelievable, because I get that every time I go into either one of those attractions. You get that feeling like, you know what, they just don't make them like this at all
They
anymore.
really don't, no. And it's sad as well when you look at it seems to be like we've discussed it there, that you can go to Disneyland and ride Pirates of the Caribbean, and you can go to Disney World and ride Pirates of the Caribbean, and for the most part, they're two different attractions. The same with the Haunted Mansion, the same with most attractions that were built at both prior to probably the last 10 years. Now, and especially taking Universal into consideration as well, everything's just a ported version of the exact same thing. Like you say, you look at Smuggler's Run, it's the same on both coasts. Rise of the Resistance, the same on both coasts. Forbidden Journey, pretty much everything that's in Universal Orlando, that's in Universal Hollywood, is pretty much the same thing for the most part. Yeah. And it's quite sad that like you say, come over to the West Coast, and we're desperate to get over there at some point. But it's that weird thing of looking, it's like, if we go to Universal Hollywood, I've pretty much ridden everything in that park already. And the things that are different, the superior versions in Orlando. Well,
the answer to that is we do have the original Disneyland, which is very different than anything that you feel at Walt Disney World. And I really do think that the main ingredient there is that this was Walt's park. Walt lived here, he walked here, he breathed here, and ultimately he died here. And you really feel that intimacy, and you really still feel, even though it seems like the company has done its damnedest lately to eradicate that spirit, you can still feel that spirit at Disneyland. And so you've got to come to, and then of course there's the neighboring Knott's Berry Farm, which is just, what a beautiful park.
Yeah, and honestly, if we were to come out to the West Coast, Knott's Berry Farm would probably be the park I'd be most excited about.
You know what, you have to come, and we can hook you up. We can meet people that are historians there that could really walk you through Ghost Town and give you just such a vivid and amazing history of Knott's. I mean, the history at Knott's dwarfs Disneyland. Yeah. Knott's is celebrating its 100th. Well, they're trying to celebrate their 100th anniversary right now.
Yeah.
And in fact, with the situation with COVID the way it is, they've bumped that anniversary now until next year.
Wow.
So that's a park that's 100 years old.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so and it was never designed as a theme park, which is part of its crazy, beautiful, wacky history. And so a lot of people that grew up as prominent Imagineers were impressed on by the things that they found at Knott's Berry Farm, including Tony Baxter. He was obsessed with Knott's and like the log ride and the Calico Mine Train. And you see a lot of that stuff later on then repeat itself in his work. Yeah. And he's talked about that. So, no, God, you got to come because there's so much history here.
Awesome. Right. So we've had an attraction no one's heard of, an attraction everyone's heard of. I have no idea what your number 3 is going to be. So, Rick, tell us.
So this is where I'm taking my creative liberty because there's a plethora of attractions that could nicely go into slot number 3, but I'm going to go for one that I would be completely remiss if I didn't say, because it's played a huge part in my life, both as TPA and then as a fan and as a designer. It's the entire culmination of everything that's ever been done before for Knott's Scary Farm.
Oh, awesome.
Knott's Scary Farm is something that I was introduced to in the very early 80s. I went with a church group here in Southern California to, they say you never learn much in church, but church introduced me to Halloween Haunt at Knott's Scary Farm. So good on them. So I went with a youth group to Knott's when I was a young boy. I was about 11 or 12 or so. And dude, my head just exploded. It was like Halloween nirvana. And I've gone every year since. And, in 94, when I created TPA, I forged a very long-standing and deep relationship with the folks at Knott's. And we were the first publication and fan site to really cover Knott's Scary Farm. For many years, it was treated like a redheaded stepchild. And even though it was the one thing that kept the company in the black year round, they just didn't want any publicity on it. And so you'd see TV stations would go and they would do a 4-minute, weather spot or something, or whatever at the end of the cast with, some monsters in the background. But nobody had ever done like a deep dive into the people that created Knott's Scary Farm or the monsters that had worked there for years. This is, again, before social media. Now monsters all have their own web pages, and they have their own Twitter accounts and all this, but none of that existed back then. And I remember at first they were not really hot on that. In fact, I was told by management at the time, if you do interviews and name names of people, those people that participate will be reprimanded and or fired.
Wow.
That's how much they really didn't want these people in the spotlight. And I thought, that's just, what a load of crap, because these people are making you a truckload of money, and they're really making something special here that's become a Halloween tradition already here in Southern California. Why wouldn't you want to put these people on a pedestal?
Exactly.
And applaud their efforts. And that was kind of one of the main thrusts behind TPA, was to really get into these attractions and call out their designers and the stories behind the ride or behind the show or whatever. And so that evolved over years. And I even remember going into a marketing meeting with them in their office. And I said, look, I really, if you don't mind, I would love to share pictures of your mazes under construction. And everybody was just very perplexed. They said, who in the world would be interested in seeing anything at Knott's Scary Farm under construction? And now, flash forward all these years later, you can't imagine one haunt or attraction that doesn't have build pictures being sent out, on the social media accounts and all that. So we blazed that trail, and then of course we blazed the trail and the TPA YouTube channel still exists. For years and years and years, I did flow-throughs of all the mazes at Knott's Scary Farm, and was the only media outlet that was really allowed to do that. And it was a big coordinated effort every year. It was a big to-do every year. And I'm very, very proud of the work that we did that way, and all the pictures and all the memories that we preserved. And I have young fans that come up now, even though TPA is retired, but I have people that come up to me, or people in the industry that I work with, and they say, we grew up on TPA. We grew up watching your videos and everything. And that's why I'm a monster today at this attraction, or that's why I design these attractions now. And God, what a crazy revelation that is, just to sit back and kind of take that in, So TPA, absolutely, and Knott's. I would be completely remiss if I didn't have Scary Farm on my list. And that's another thing that you have to come out and experience is Knott's Scary Farm.
I know it's one of those things we talk about Halloween Horror Nights. Like you say, you've documented all those mazes, and it's the same with Horror Nights, because once that maze is gone, it's gone. You never get to see it again. So it's because me and Tracy don't get to come out there that often, if we miss a specific maze, that's it. We're never likely to see it again. And I don't know whether they are internally documenting them, but if not, they should be.
Yeah.
They should be doing 4K walkthroughs.
I think they do now. But back in the day, you're hard pressed to find a lot of videos or pictures of some of the greatest dark rides and stuff we've had at parks, because, I learned this very early on when I was talking to people like Mark Davis about Pirates. There aren't a lot of pictures of the process and everything. And there's a lot of artwork, but there's just today when something is built, I'm sure there's probably 1 million pictures literally out there of Rise of the Resistance being built, right? From everybody that's worked on it and touched it, because you have it on your phone. You whip out your phone and take a picture that you're not supposed to, and there you go. You have it forever, right? But back then, I said to Mark, I can't believe that you guys never just took pictures of meetings with Walt about this or more of the hands-on. And Mark said, well, we were just showing up every day and doing our job. That's just what we did.
Yeah, looking back at that, it wasn't a thing back, theme park fans weren't a thing back then. So they probably didn't think the longevity of people are going to want to see this in 10, 20, 30 years time. It's just, we're just doing our job. Yeah.
Well, it's true. I just, last year I met this wonderful woman. Her name is Tanya Norris. She worked as the interior designer at WED on New Orleans Square. And one of the last things that she did was worked on the Haunted Mansion. She did the interior design for Mansion. She was the person that came up with the wallpaper that we all know and love, and everybody has on their desktops. Yep. And she literally had no idea that there was this huge fan base. And for the very first time ever last year at Midsummer Scream, we had her out on stage for our Haunted Mansion 50th anniversary presentation.
Nice.
And the industry the fans have fallen in love with her. And she hadn't been back to ride the Haunted Mansion since it opened. Think about that for a minute.
Wow.
And so I had the good fortune of taking her back to Disneyland, and we rode the Haunted Mansion. And it was just crazy being there with her, reuniting her with this old attraction. And it was a magical day. It was a really special day. We were there with Tom Morris, who's another longtime Imagineer. And it was pure magic. It was a really great day.
Yeah, it's surprising, like you say that, how many people we've interviewed on the podcast that have never actually got to experience the things that they've created things for, which I find bizarre.
And so that's not a new thing, right? So it's we create things for, China or Dubai or whatever, and very few of us get to go over and see these things. But here's somebody like Tanya who created something that's been in her backyard her whole, adult career here, adult life here, and she hadn't been back. And I said to her, Tanya, people are going to ask, so I need you to tell me why. Why have you never gone back? And she just looked at me and said, it never occurred to me that it was something that I wanted to do. It was one of many jobs that I did for Walt. And we just did it, and I just never really went back to look at it. She goes, I don't even have a good reason. So it's a weird thing. So even people, it's not a new thing. Even though we're doing more international parks now, it's not new. People that worked on these attractions here that you think, of course, everybody and their mother's been on Haunted Mansion. Somebody that created the wallpaper in the freaking ride had not been back to Mansion since it opened.
Well, yeah, because it's like weird things.
It's crazy.
We interviewed Howard Drossin a few years ago, the guy who did all the music for Marvel Superhero Island at Islands of Adventure. He's never been.
Yeah,
and I find that so sad. And then Andy Garfield, the guy who did the music for Marathon of Mayhem, or some of the music for Marathon of Mayhem or Horror Nights last year, he never actually got to see it in person at Horror Nights, and I find that so sad.
Yeah. Andy's a great guy. I go back years and years with Andy.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a home haunt here in Southern California called Boot Hill that way back in the day, over 20 years ago, I had him write a score for Boot Hill.
Awesome.
So that was like that was probably one of his first, themed entertainment, quote unquote, gigs, was doing this score that is still used today, for Boot Hill. So yeah, I've been with Andy on his journey, and he is the best of the best. His work is second to none in the industry. I love everything that he does.
Yeah, well, Men in Black Alien Attack is my favorite attraction anywhere in the world. So yes, I love the music.
Absolutely,
for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
The Universe in You is like the best thing ever, right?
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, it
is really good stuff.
It's so sad that people get to create things or attractions or anything in a theme park but never actually get to experience it themselves. I find it kind of bizarre, honestly.
Yeah, it is strange. I mean, and until just a couple of years ago, I had never been out of the U.S. and my first trip was with Idea Attack, and we went to Beijing. And boy, talk about a first trip out of the U.S. Usually it's a little trip that barely counts, like to Canada or to Mexico or something, right? No, I hopped my ass on a plane, and 13 hours later or whatever, I'm in Beijing, and you are keenly aware that you are a long way from home, my friend, and nobody cares at all that you're American.
Yeah,
and it's a very, very interesting thing. But it also showed me that as the song goes, it's a small world, and so literally, I mean, anybody that's a designer. Boy, even if the company doesn't take you, and I always think it's a shame that people that are show writers and stuff get left behind and never get to go see these things. But if the company doesn't take you to see what you've worked on, so hard, put your own self on an airplane and go see these things.
Yeah,
it's tangible and it's doable. And I mean, you and Tracy come here to the States to go to Horror Nights, so it is just a matter of just doing it.
Yeah,
right. So it's not like it's going to take 4 weeks on a ship, No, you get on an airplane and you sleep for a few hours and you're there. So just do it, man. And that's what I say to all the young designers that are like, well, I'll never get to see my stuff. You know what? Yes, you will. Just do it. Yeah. It's that simple.
Well, the thing is, we actually, Darren went to Islands and actually videoed Marvel Superhero Island and got a lot of, like, as much of the music as he could get the different sections and sent it to Howard so he could at least get to experience it. It's weird. I find it strange.
Yeah. You'll like this. I was thinking about my very first trip to Orlando was shortly after I turned 25. It was for my 25th birthday. And Islands was brand new. And we came through the Port of Adventure there. And there was a big cart sitting right there in the middle of the walkway. And it was just jam-packed full of all the CDs of the park,
yeah.
The soundtrack. And I know that you've talked about that on other shows, yeah. and there it was. And I lost my mind because back then I was a big soundtrack collector. And I thought, this is so rad that this park has an actual CD of all the different lands and the attractions and things like that. So that was the first thing I ever bought when I stepped foot into IOA for the first time.
Yeah, I own that CD, and I am so, like, I'm obviously a huge Universal Orlando fan now, way more than I was when we first went, but I'm so glad that I got a copy when I did, because you can only get it on eBay now, and it's quite
From
sad.
What I understand, and I don't remember exactly what the details are. I think there are multiple iterations of it. I think that one of the tracks was switched out shortly after it opened. So I think there are, and you may know better than I do. I know there are at least probably 2 different versions of that CD.
3 actually.
Okay. Yep.
But
so there's the challenge, right? You got to have all 3.
Yeah, it's such a shame because, like, that CD only has something like 26 tracks on it, and yet if you walk around that park, take the Wizarding World out in Skull Island, obviously because they're new additions, but just in the other lands, the amount of different bits of music that aren't on that CD, and it's like, oh my God, like I'm going to end up plugging things. So one of the best interviews we have ever done in the end, sorry Rick, don't take this badly.
No, it's
was William Kidd, the guy who did most of the music for Islands of Adventure.
That's awesome.
It had been 20 years since he created that music, and yet he still knew every note, why it was there, everything behind it, like he'd done it yesterday. And sitting and talking to the person who created that music it goes down as one of my greatest memories of doing this podcast, because it was just so awesome. Because theme park music's one of those things, I think it's in the form more than it ever used to be, but it's one of those things I think the average guest doesn't notice. But if it wasn't there, you would notice that it wasn't there. You bet.
Soundscape is so incredibly important. And so the things that folks like Andy Garfield do, and they add that invisible layer that is of paramount importance to these things. Absolutely.
We've gone completely off track now.
No, it's good because you know what? These things shape us.
Yes.
Right? The soundscapes shape us. And while we're on the subject of Universal, I have to say something that absolutely shaped me was getting on this little ride that I knew nothing about called Spider-Man.
Oh, yes, I think yeah.
And holy crap! I mean, now when people go, even if they haven't been on it, they've heard of it and they're kind of aware of what they're in for. But dude, we didn't know anything about what Spider-Man was. We didn't know what oceaneering was. We didn't know any of this stuff. And we got on this scoop vehicle, and for the next few minutes, my mind was just shattered.
Agreed.
And I have to say, a moment that is forever imprinted is the building sequence when you're levitating.
Yep.
Right? When you're levitating, that was like the biggest holy crap moment. Yeah. There are very few of those. And I don't even know, I was very nice, but I call them holy moments when we're writing these things, where there's very few moments like that in theme park experiences. You always go for the wow, right? But you don't usually achieve that. And, I would say that moment is akin to when, and you don't know this because you haven't been on our Pirates, but riding our Pirates, when you come out of the caves and the sea battle reveals itself to you, and suddenly you're in this huge space between a ship firing on a fort and the fort firing back at the ship. That is like the biggest wow moment in theme park history. And that was a very similar, like, oh my God moment that I had when we were levitated in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And so those are nuggets, man. When you get moments like that, they'll really take you aback. no matter your background, no matter your profession, no matter your age, that is pure gold. And that's just, wow, that's such a great thing.
A similar thing in Transformers, that it's one of those moments that for me, knowing behind the scenes of it blows my mind. And I point it out to everyone I can when I'm on that ride. But the section when you mount into the elevator and go up to the second floor, I point that out to people and they're like, holy if you didn't know it was there, you would never know it's there. Like Chris, who's on the podcast with us, we rode it with him in February. He did not know that elevator section. So I pointed it out to him and he was just sat there like completely starstruck, just amazed at, holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah. When Transformers opened, I went to the media event for that, but then, before the media event, Transformers here in Hollywood had like the longest soft opening in the history of themed entertainment. It was like 3 months this thing was soft open. It's like everybody in the Western Hemisphere had ridden Transformers before it even opened.
Yeah.
And so I remember like the first ride was like oh my God, this is a great moment. And then I immediately got back on. And then you start all your rides where you're actually like turned and twisted in your seat, looking at how everything works.
Yeah.
At least that's how I did. And dude, just watching the elevator scene and all that stuff work,
cool.
People watching you and the cameras are like, what is that dude doing? But you're twisted and all gnarled looking at this mechanism that's taking you up and down. And it is really fantastic. And that was, going back to my Disneyland days when I was in training there, they said, one of the first things they tell you in orientation, or at least back then, they said, you're about to go through the looking glass and a lot of the Disney magic is going to be ruined for you because you're going to see how we do all of our tricks.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the exact opposite.
Yep.
When I started working Pirates and then when I worked Haunted Mansion, seeing how this stuff was done and all the craftsmanship and all of the trickery and all the sheer genius that went into creating these things, that set off a firestorm in my imagination. And that's when I became, like I said, voracious to learn how everything worked and the history of everything. So for me, it was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I stepped through that looking glass and never went back. It was just like, oh no, this is where I want to live, in this world of creating this stuff. That's to me where the magic is. Anybody can sit on a ride and enjoy it and be fooled by things. But to be one of the folks that gets to make this magic, to me, that was the target, man.
Yeah.
And for over 20 years, that stayed a moving target. And now that I have it, I'll never let go. But it was, it was becoming part of it and seeing how it worked that just really, that to me is the magic, right? I'll go on any attraction and be wowed like everybody else. But then every ride after that, I'm checking out everything, where the lights are, how the show set works, where the screen meets the practical set, everything, that's just how my mind works when I go through any attraction, whether it's a haunted attraction or something like Rise of the Resistance. I think that's the way any of us that are working in the industry, we never take our worker hat off at that point.
Yeah.
But oh my God, my list is so long, dude. So I'm a huge Vegas guy, right? So I've grown up going to Las Vegas, and I lived there. I worked there for 3 years on the Strip. I still go like pre-COVID. I was going every month. It's like my jam. It's my happy place. And so one of the things that was a huge impression on me were the original attractions that were at Luxor. The Luxor attraction trilogy that was created by Doug Trumbull, who he was a visual effects master, Blade Runner, and
Back to the Future, the ride, I do believe
he did. So there's the connection there. So Doug had kind of like carte blanche to do this trilogy of attractions for Luxor, and it was on the second level. It's still called the attractions level. Sadly, nothing exists really anymore at Luxor from what was there. But boy, they had the trilogy of attractions. One was a ride simulator, like a Star Tours type thing. Another one was this weird show called Luxor Live, and it was the first time anybody had ever really seen super high definition video. It was a stage like a production, like a talk show. You couldn't tell who was real and who wasn't real. and then 4D effects in the theater happened around you because the spirits were unhappy, like lights would explode and shower sparks down, and it was just seamless. It was the first time I'd ever seen high def video used, and it blew my mind. It was so years ahead of what what the industry was doing. And then the third one was a huge IMAX theater, and it was about Luxor in the future. And so that trilogy of attractions, it was so heady and it was so far ahead of its time that most guests just didn't get it. Most people walked around with, huh? On their face. They just didn't understand. In fact, in later years, the people that worked there had to hand out little tip cards that explained like the synopsis of the story of how they were all linked together. And I thought, oh, man, if you have to hand out cards explaining what the story is, you've kind of gone too deep for the general public, right? As designers, we knock ourselves out because everything these days, it has to be tied together with logical story. We have to make it work. It's got to be a reason for everything. And at the end of the day, kids get just as excited going on something like, Star Tours or Pirates of the Caribbean as they do playing hopscotch on Main Street when a cast member draws it with chalk, So we set the bar so high for ourselves. But at the end of the day, people just entertainment is entertainment. Yeah. And the bar is actually very low when it comes to the threshold. So when you do go deeper and deeper into story, you get yourself into murky territory. And that's what happened with Luxor. That combined with, obviously, somebody came through after the attractions opened and after the casino opened and said, we could make X amount of money on that square footage where that ride is, So things all changed. And of course, the Luxor attractions vanished. But anybody that's a longtime Vegas fan, certainly a Vegas fan from the 90s, the Luxor attraction and the Trumbull attraction trilogy, that absolutely played a huge part in me as a fan and now as a designer.
Cool. Yeah, you're pulling out all the ones I've never heard of at this point.
Dude, I know. Nate, you're like, okay, go ahead, because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But oh God, I'd be remiss. And Justin is going to be very excited about this.
Oh, cool.
Dude, the Water Vortex in Poseidon's Fury.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dude, the first time I saw that, when that door opens and that vortex tunnel is going, that is like the coolest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. Yep. Now, when you walk through there on a humid Orlando day, you're like, okay, this is obviously the portal to hell as you're going through. But, dude, I have never seen anything like that. And that's pure magic. Yes. So, yeah, I almost forgot that. I had to mention the Water Vortex. In fact, when I was listening to Justin's interview with you about this, when you guys were talking about it, I was in the car going, yes, 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 because that really, it's to my knowledge, it's never been done anywhere else. And that combined with, of course, the amazing flyaway room, which has I've only seen it done twice really well. And once was at Star Trek in Vegas, again, back to Vegas. And then, of course, at Islands. And both of those were Gary Goddard projects. And that's a Gary Goddard trick. And, that's fantastic. Years later, when I worked at Thinkwell, we were trying to work that into one of our attractions. And now to do a successful flyaway, without getting into all the weeds about it, it is so expensive to do that because it changes everything, including the weight load of the building, the HVAC, everything. It's just, that's why you don't really see that anymore, because it is so cost prohibitive to do it correctly now. That is a fantastic gag that kind of now lives in the past, unless somebody like a Disney or a Universal one of these days wants to do it again and throw a ton of money at it. Yeah, it's a very, very expensive gag. So Poseidon's, yes. I mean, if you're visiting Islands, you've got to do that because it, like you guys have talked about, you're always afraid that that's going to be closed one of these days, without fanfare. And
I think it's coming.
No, that's wonderful because it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah. It desperately needs an update, mind. It desperately needs an update.
It does, and I just don't know that. I just don't know that they're going to do it because the park is encroaching. Yep, the park's encroaching rapidly. That said, T2 3D. Oh yes, man, right?
Yep.
The hits keep coming, Lee.
Love it.
So T2 3D. When the first time, imagine this. Imagine, if you will, when I went to Florida for the first time, there were three things that I experienced like literally a day apart. And that would be the original Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, Spider-Man, and T2 3D. And you can imagine, as a fan from Southern California, my mind was just like beyond just broken. I was like, what in the hell, Orlando? And then I was like, what the hell, California? Because at that time it was like, we just would, we would get like the, second or third generation of these attractions when they would come out to the parks here. But going on those 3 attractions, Tower, Spider-Man, and T2,
yep.
I was done. I was like, oh, that's it. Stick a fork in because we're done here. And that was, I for years grew up watching T2, and just obviously it was worse for wear in the later years. And then when they knew they were going to get rid of it, they didn't really do a lot of maintenance on it. But T2 was a game changer, man. That's a bar that was raised, and I don't think anybody will ever beat that in that kind of show again.
Agreed. It was, I've said for a long time, it's still my favorite sort of 4D theater experience, because it puts everything in there together. You've got live actors, you've got they're not really animatronics, but the T60s or 70s, whatever they are, at the side, and then the interaction with the screen, the full wraparound screen by the end, the 3D was stunning. It just, it was. I was gutted when it closed.
Oh man, the whole experience. The whole experience. And I saw it so many times after. I don't exactly remember my, like the first show, but I know that I was blown away, and I know that like when the theater dropped with that huge LN2 blast. Dude, I just sat there going, what in the hell? And immediately you get out of these attractions and you turn right around and go right back in them. And that was before, that was back in the 90s, before the parks were like ungodly crowded, by design. But so you were able to go right back on, and experience these things. And it was beautiful, man. And by sheer luck, it wasn't by plan or anything. I happened to be at Universal Orlando on the very last day of T2, and I watched one of the very last shows with Gary Goddard. He was there by himself, and Gary was there, and I had known Gary for a couple of years through TPA, and I was there and got to sit with Gary and watch my last show of T2, which that was fantastic memory. Obviously, that's a really cool moment for me as a fan. So so that's a big deal. And then of course seeing Potter there for the first time, and then of course Diagon Alley, and it looks like I'm probably going to go with Idea Attack to IAAPA this year. So at that point, I'll get to experience Hagrid's.
Oh, have you not ridden it yet?
Right. No, and I haven't really. I purposely not watched anything. So it's like I know very little about it. I know too much, but I know very little. Yeah. Type of thing. And
so Rick, I need to give you a hint.
I'm waiting to do it.
You need to ride it during the day, and you also need to ride it at night, because it is 2 entirely different experiences. Riding it at night is life-changing.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, and I really want to do it with Gary Blumenstein, who was the creative on it, the creative director on it.
Awesome.
So he can show me all the little things and tell me all the war stories and everything about it. So I'm looking forward to that. And but dude, the list just goes on and on and on.
I'm sure.
In Indiana Jones here, you haven't been here, but Indiana Jones at Disneyland. Yeah. That was a huge deal when that was created. That they literally changed all of Adventureland for that, and it took years to build and to finish. And at that time, I was becoming friends with Tony Baxter. It was a very magical time for me, and so Indy was a big deal, when that opened. I don't need to go into details, but that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And anybody that was a fan back then, or a designer, went on Indy and came out a different person, on the other end. And I would say that goes all the way up. Everything has shaped me. Knott's Berry Farm, the log ride and the mine train, or just walking around Calico, Ghost Town. That's part of my DNA. Funky little things like Movieland Wax Museum that used to live down the street from Knott's. That used to be there used to be a 3-for ticket, because there was, next to Knott's, there was a California gator farm. It was an alligator farm.
Okay.
And so we would go to Knott's, and then you leave one of the gates and you get your special discount entry to the gator farm and then Movieland Wax Museum, and then you head back to Knott's for the rest of the day. And that used to be the Buena Park. That was the trifecta there. And so people that grew up in the 70s and 80s will remember that. from Knott's, and that impressed on me. And I mean, just everything. and now, I mean, Rise of the Resistance. I've done it once. I did it one day. I did it once before it opened. One day before I think it opened to the public. I did Rise of the Resistance with a friend of mine from WDI, and that really is. Everybody says that it's like the game changer and that it's like the whole next level. And again, it's one of those things that once the honeymoon's over, and I've had a long time to reflect on it. I still say that, boy, if you could go back to 1967 and go on Pirates when Pirates opened,
yes,
that's pretty much. I don't know that it gets better than that. Rise of the Resistance is absolutely a game changer, in modern theme park design. And it has, we were talking about those, holy moments. It's got 3 of those. And I don't want to give it anything away because I know that most people haven't ridden.
I've watched all the videos at this point. I think I've seen it through at least 6 times.
Well, there you go. So it's one of those things where the ride just reveals bigger and bigger and bigger moments as you go. And I found myself having 3 distinct wow moments in Rise. And then when I got off, I was so impressed with it. When I got off the ride, I started crying.
Really?
And I said, I'm a super emotional guy.
Yeah, me too. So I get that.
Anytime that I'm moved on an attraction like that, I will cry at in a heartbeat if I really connect with something.
I get that.
And Rise was just so overwhelming in every way that I just got off, and it was just like this I got really choked up. I was like, boy, if anybody that worked on this isn't just beaming with pride, I don't know what would. Now I know that the process was tumultuous. I have many friends that worked on it over the years that it was getting Star Wars done was part pride and part nightmare, getting the project done. And so I know there was a lot of hair pulling, but at the end of the day, this thing is open and it's out in the world, and it's living thing, and you have to be so proud. And so I, as a designer, I look forward to that moment when I work on something that I can actually go on and see people enjoying and laughing. And that's a moment that I'm very hungry for, that I haven't had as a show writer for all these years. But I know the moment's coming, and when it does come, it's going to be fantastic. And everybody's going to be like, dude, why is this old dude standing here crying by himself watching people? And so it's going to be me, and it's going to be security surrounding me, watching people on these rides. But I mean, super emotional. So everything, like in kind of wrapping up for you, everything that we do shapes us, right? It doesn't matter whether it's Rise of the Resistance or a 50-year-old attraction or simply having a drink at Carthay Circle at DCA in the bar there that's all themed. All of this it makes impressions on us, and I think that you keep getting impressed on until the day you cash in your chips and call it a life. But because we as designers and as creatives, every video game I play, every movie I watch, I mean everything has an impression on you. And so even folks that I know that have been in this industry for a long time, that are veterans and are legends in the industry, they constantly learn things. So it's a process, and thank you, and I'm really super grateful that you had me on to talk about the rides that created me.
Yeah, not the 3, about the 25 we've had at this point.
Yeah, 25, 60, fine. Whatever.
Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure. It's really, like I say, it's really interesting to delve in behind the scenes of the people that do create these things, and it's been awesome to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I've had so much fun, and I know I ramble, but I get so excited. And this properly done, Lee. This is done over 6 hours over multiple beers. This is a drinking game, really. And so we have the truncated version here for everybody. But one of these days, I hope to sit down with you and just really geek out and talk to you guys face to face.
Oh God, yeah. That'll
be a lot of fun.
Me and you in a room together, like I don't think anyone else would get a word in edgeways because me and you are very similar. We like to talk.
It would be great. It would be so much fun.
Cool. Well, it's been awesome. I will give you the opportunity, Rick, to plug anything you want to plug that you're working on, your company, whatever, your Facebook, anything you want.
Well, I live online really only on Instagram, and that's Rick West 999, as in 999 happy haunts. And so that's where I be online. And Midsummer Scream. Midsummer Scream is something that I co-founded and am the creative director of. It's the world's largest Halloween and horror convention here in Southern California. And that's midsummerscream.org. And then on all the socials, every platform as Midsummer Scream.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to get out for Midsummer at some point. I know, like you say, Gabe over at the theme park duo is always bigging it up. And it does.
Yeah, they're huge fans.
Yeah, but I know. Cool. Right. Yep. Well, that will wrap up another episode. We are going to wrap up, as we always do, with another Universal Is, and I am honoured to have Rick come up with this one. But of course, if you want to be involved, then all you've got to do is let us know what you think Universal is in 3 words or less. And let's not have any swear words in there. And you can send them to us at podcast@uuopodcast.com, and I will pass it over to you, Rick, to tell us what yours is.
Universal is an industry treasure.
Awesome. See you next week, guys.
Guess that wraps things up for another Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. You guys did all right. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest, keyword UUO Podcast. Listen and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere podcasts are found. You can find our blog at uuopodcast.com. Send us your spews, which Lou gets your poo recordings, questions, or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com. Check out our friends the Theme Park Duo and our awesome sponsors Mouse and Muggle Travel Company. So, until next time, don't give up your day job, say cheese, and see you later.